for the Philadelphia Inquirer, Inquirer.com. You got to check out his podcast, Uncovering the Birds. That, of course, is Jeff McLane. Jeffrey, good morning. How are we today?
Good morning, guys. How are you?
We
Good,
are
Jeff.
doing great. The Eagles coming off of a beatdown of the Cowboys, 34-6. Obviously, short week with the Commanders on Thursday. But, Jeff, what was that locker room like Sunday after beating up a divisional opponent? I know it was Cooper Rush and Trey Lance, but it was still the Dallas Cowboys. What were they like Sunday?
Yeah, it had been the first time that the Eagles had won at AT&T Stadium since 2017. That's 6 straight losses. And, while there's a lot of players that weren't on all those losing teams, there were some, like Lane Johnson, who had talked about it and said he had suffered some pretty bad beatdowns there in Arlington, and was happy to finally get one and to do so convincingly. I saw, I guess, on social media some of the pictures the Eagles sent out of kind of looking joyous celebrations. So we don't necessarily get that. They kind of like, hey, the media's coming in. No celebrations. Let's keep it tight. And for the most part, I think the players were respectful of their opponent, but you sensed that it was something that they want to exercise, winning down there finally. But there was also a bunch of players that were looking ahead to the next game because of the short week and because of its importance.
Jeff, Saquon talked about the fact that it was sort of a launching off point after the bye week. And we've seen a team at 5-0 really coming into their own. Can you tell us about the season in 2 parts and what you've observed from behind the scenes and on the field?
Yeah, I think the question to him was like, it was a rocky start. And then he kind of said, well, no, we didn't think it was rocky. You guys did. And that's fair enough. I mean, he said we viewed that start as almost like a preseason. And as I told you guys heading into the season, that I thought it was going to take a little while for this team to get started. You get two new coordinators and 2 new schemes, and you had a fair amount of players new players on the defensive side of the ball, some young players. So it was going to take a little while. And then if you looked at the schedule, it has kind of played out very much to their benefit. But that bye week came at an opportune time for them to really look, and we've talked about this already, about both sides of the ball defensively. They tinkered with the personnel in terms of its usage, and it was a time to get Cooper DeJean in there in the slot, which has improved the unit clearly. On the offensive side of the ball, there were definitely more changes that took place in terms of the scheme and shifting more to run-based offense, going back to more of what the Eagles had done under Nick Sirianni from 2021 and 23 in the run game, and what Jeff Stoutland brings to that unit. Riding obviously Saquon Barkley. So yeah, I mean that was definitely an important pivot point for the Eagles. All that said, their winning closing winning percentage of the teams that they've beaten is like 36%, which is easily the lowest in the league. So you have to take that all into context when you're talking about this 5-game winning streak.
So to that point, we've been asking the audience today, do you think these last 5 games have been more so the Eagles, or do you think it has been the opponents? So I'd be curious to get your answer on that. Has the Eagles' success been because of them more so, or because of the opponents?
Well, I still think it's because of the Eagles. And they've won some of these games in convincing fashion, and I think it's almost like 1,000-yard differential between the Eagles and their opponents. So they're, for the most part, they're taking care of business. They haven't been like quote unquote ugly wins. I mean, I guess maybe against the Browns a little bit and the Jaguars, the way that played out late in that game. But for the most part, they've handled these teams certainly on the defensive side of the ball. I don't know how you could fault them for the ills of the opponents that they're playing. I mean, Cooper Rush was terrible, and Mike McCarthy was terrible in his play calling. But they only scored 6 points and never even reached the end zone. And I think 3 of those points came after the Jalen Hurts fumble down to the 6-yard line. So I mean, they did their job. They created 5 turnovers. Well, really 4. I guess the one was on Rush, but they're playing well, and they're doing it against teams that aren't great. But they won at the Bengals, which I thought was an impressive victory. And again, they handled these last 3 opponents pretty handily. And now we'll really see, because these next 5, I guess the next 5 opponents, and even if you put the Panthers in there, I think they have winning percentage of close to 600. So we'll see how that goes.
Jeff, I know in the past you've written about it and talked about it on your podcast about, younger players and hitting a wall as they come into the NFL and they're adjusting to life in the NFL, that it can be a real thing. How much do you worry about that with this young defense showing such great strides that they will potentially hit a wall down the stretch?
I don't worry about as much with, with Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell because, cornerbacks, there isn't as much on them as there is the guys up front, and I think that was what maybe you saw last year with young guys like Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, and Nolan Smith. They wore down as the season progressed. And, while I am a little concerned about how much they're playing Jalen Carter, he's still a young guy. He hasn't shown any signs of letting up. There's more to it than just the physical part. There's the mental part. And, that could come in play later in the season. I think what I'd just be more concerned about is just the better competition that you're facing, right? The better receivers. Terry McLaurin, he's going to be a test for Quinyon Mitchell this Thursday night. He's one of the better underrated receivers in the league. The following week against the Rams, you got two good receivers, Paka Nakua and Cooper Kupp. And Cooper Kupp in the slot is as nifty as they come. We'll see how Cooper DeJean does in that matchup. So, and then on and on and on. So, that's really what you're going to see as the season plays out. Just the better competition, and particularly with these next 5 games.
Speaking of the young players on defense, we saw an increase in usage for Jalix Hunt on Sunday, and we saw more little usage of Bryce Huff. So should we expect to see more Jalix Hunt moving forward? And is this who Bryce Huff will be the remainder of the season?
I mean, that seems to be with the way things are trending. He does have this left wrist thing that could be playing a factor in why he's being used less. I spoke to him after the game. He kind of just said, he mentioned the hand as being a reason, but said there wasn't really much of an explanation. And this is to just take make the most of his opportunities. It seems that only in obvious passing downs is when they're putting him out there on the field. And for the most part, that's pretty much when he's shown that he can get to the quarterback, when he's just ears pinned back and rush the passer from a 4-point stance. He did to his credit get a strip sack, although it was kind of in late in the game. Jalix Hunt is a guy that the Eagles have liked. I've liked him since training camp. He's definitely showed some pop, and that was definitely you questioned that pick from someone coming from a small school and having moved from safety so late into his college career. But you saw it in camp. In fact, I think he's got a little more pop as an edge rusher than even Nolan Smith. Nolan Smith has played well this year. He's got a good motor. He's done very well at setting the edge against the run. But Jalix is got some pass rushing genes in him. And, when the Eagles did make a move at the trade deadline, one of the explanations I had received was that Jalix Hunt is someone that they feel like needs to play more. So to bring in another edge rusher would have deprived him of those snaps. And that's why we saw him out there on the field more. He had a couple good plays. I still feel like he's got to develop more. I don't know if he's going to be playing as much as he did. I think the reason why his snaps were higher than Graham's and Smith's was because, when they pulled a lot of the starters and the older guys, he played more late in the game. So I don't know if that's how it's going to play out over the course of the next, couple months, but you're definitely going to see more of Hunt out there.
Jeff, real quick, updates on Jordan Mailata for Thursday, and what about Darius Slay?
Yeah, so Mailata's 21-day window opened after he was on the IR for the hamstring. The fact that the Eagles put out their injury report for Monday, which they didn't practice, but they had to make an estimation, and they estimated him as full. So that tells you that there's a really strong chance that he can be off IR and ready to play on Thursday night. I'm not saying that means he will, but it seems that signs are pointing that he'll be back. And Slay.
Yeah.
Slay, he was in and out of the game, so it was I don't think it was one of those things probably where they just kind of were able to do whatever they had to do to get him out there. But at some point, just they didn't really need him to play much more. But that's a short turnaround, and I'm sure that ankle's really hurting him today. So we'll see. We'll see what happens when they actually practice today.
Nakobe Dean groin, nothing to worry about, or wasn't that listed?
He was fine. I spoke to him briefly after the game. He seemed fine. Didn't seem like he had to receive any additional treatment.
Okay, good.
I saw Landon Dickerson head to the X-ray room along with Darius Slay, but he wasn't on the injury report. So
great.
I think those are the main guys that you're concerned about whether they can turn around this short time.
Jeff, we appreciate it as always,
Jeff.
man. Keep up the great work. Enjoy the short turnaround yourself, and then we'll talk to you again next week.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot.
There he's Jeff McLane.